Today I am going to make a playing card design. For this project, I will be using some watercolor paper. I have just a 9 by 12 sheet right here. This is a 140-pound Master's Touch watercolor. And then I'm also using a piece of computer paper, drawing paper. I've got Sharpies, thick and thin. And I will either use I'll use a pencil, I'll use some uh, transfer paper, it's like carbon paper, or I will show you another way to do this if you do not have any carbon paper. I'll be using paint to color mine, but you can use anything to color yours. I'm going to first start off by folding my drawing paper in half. Now again, I'm just using regular computer paper for this, but if you have drawing paper, that's fine too. And the reason I'm folding it in half is because I'm only going to draw half of my card and then I'll transfer it to my paper 2 times so that my um, card will match. And I'm just looking at a couple of different cards here. Remember, I'm only doing the top half, so you can kind of be inspired maybe by some cards that you have lying around. And my card is going to be animal inspired, but I'm looking at the faces and notice there's either a profile one or 3/4. So profile just shows one eye, 3/4 view shows both eyes, but it's still kind of a little bit off to one side. And I'm just working on the half of my paper here. I'm going to just really lightly sketch out the maybe an oval for where I want the head of my animal to go. And then I'm going to go ahead and start sketching out my animal. Now I decided to go with an alpaca. I've got an alpaca farm by my house, so I've taken some pictures of alpacas, and it's llamas. Alpacas are some of my favorite animals. So I'm just going to really lightly kind of sketch out a guideline. And then I can decide too if I want to add maybe some fancy details to my animal too. So I'm just going to start kind of getting the general areas, the general parts of my alpaca here. I'm going to do the eye, the top of the nose, kind of indicate some wavy um, areas for where, the hair of the alpaca is. And then I'm going to bring that down over by the ear. And I'm going to curve that back up and start kind of adding in the details. So I'm going to go ahead and keep on drawing mine and try to get some details here on my picture. And then I will add a couple of elements that make it look like a playing card as well. So I'll get just kind of the very basic shapes of my animal, whatever animal you choose, and just make sure that it is kind of going off to one side, either a profile view where you just see one eye, or a 3/4 view where you see both eyes, but one of them is, kind of a little bit less than the other. And once I get the very basic shape of my animal done, I can start adding some other details. So maybe I'll add a crown, maybe I'll add some royal clothing, maybe I will add some type of accessories or something. So you can really have fun and play around with the details. So I'm going to keep on working on mine and see what details I can come up with. And then I will go ahead and get ready to transfer my drawing to my watercolor paper. And I can do that 2 times. So I only have to draw my drawing once, and then we'll be able to transfer it twice to my final paper. All right, you can see I've added some more details. I added the letter, I added the suit, so I went with clubs, or I mean spades. I added a couple of things just here and there to make it a little bit fancier. And now I'm going to go ahead and transfer it to my piece of watercolor paper. So you can kind of line it up and get it ready. If you have carbon paper, all you have to do is put the dark side down and put it underneath your picture and then just trace and it will transfer the image for you. If you don't have carbon paper, you can flip your paper over like this and you can color on the back with a pencil and just make sure that you get a really good coloring or covering of the back of your paper like this. And then once you've done that to the entire paper, you flip it over and you trace your drawing and it will transfer your lines as well. So either way, you can do it like that and just trace your lines and then they'll show up on your paper, or you can use carbon paper if you have it. So I'm going to go ahead and get mine ready and I'm going to start tracing over my lines here so that I can transfer my image to my watercolor paper. So I'm just kind of going over all of the areas that I had drawn before. I'm pushing down a good amount so that I get kind of a nice line to work with on the other side. And so I can see my line. And then I'm going to go ahead and get that all set and ready to go. All right, you can see that I have transferred it upside down. Now I'm going to do it right side up or the other way. And I'm kind of lining it up the best that I can with the edges of my paper, trying to kind of center it. I am going to leave a little bit of space between the two sections when I transfer this one so that I can come up with a good way to connect the two images kind of in the middle. So that's kind of the hardest part, is deciding how to connect the two in the center. So I'm going to go ahead and retrace, this time the upside down version. You can see that I've got them both traced, and now I have to add something to kind of connect them in the middle here. So you can kind of work with the area here and figure out a way to connect the two. It may be, designing some type of clothing. I'm just kind of adding different shapes, patterns, and you can see when I add it to one area, I add it to the other until both make sense and, work for the center part of the card. So this is just kind of to indicate some royal clothing, and of course it has to connect from the top to the bottom, and we'll continue with that. All right. Next, I need to outline. So I'm going to go ahead and go over everything with a thick Sharpie. In my case, you can transfer it with whatever kind of pen that you have. If you do watercolor, like I plan on doing, just make sure it is a waterproof pen. So I will transfer this. And there you have it. Now I'm going to use my thin Sharpie and I'm going to add some shading. So I am using some hatching on the face, and just to kind of add a little bit of a shadow to my alpaca. And then because the alpacas have the curls, I'm going to use some scribbling to shade the rest of the alpaca. So I decided to use just these two variations of ink shading, hatching, and scribbling to shade my piece. And I'm going to go ahead and add that in wherever I think the shading would look nice, just to give it a little bit of extra value and form. Now that I have finished shading, I'm going to add some color. I decided to use watercolor paint, so I'm going to fill in the different areas with watercolor. And as I use watercolor, I'm going to make sure that I let an area dry before I get to another, or before I go right next to it with a different color, just so that my colors don't bleed. So when I do paint with watercolor, I tend to just kind of jump around the picture to make sure that none of the wet areas are touching or bleeding together. So I'm starting with red and kind of jumping around and painting what I think would look nice as red. And then we'll add some other colors as well. Next is gold. I'm using yellow ochre for this. And this was just matching the card. I'm not sure exactly what this is supposed to be, some kind of element, but I liked the shapes, and so I decided to add it to my card as well. You could also have your animal holding like a sword, or I've seen, like a scepter, flower, things like that. I'm also going to start adding some color on my animal itself. I'm using kind of a golden color for the alpaca's ear and face, and then we'll use a darker color for the rest of the body. When you are finished painting, like I am here, you can see I've added all of the colors. You may want to use some scissors and just trim the corners of your watercolor paper just by kind of curving right at the very tip of the corners here. And that can kind of make it look more like a playing card. A lot of times playing cards have rounded corners. And so if you just cut the corners or trim the corners off, you can have that playing card feel. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and I hope you have fun trying this one out for yourself. If you do, please let me know how it goes. I love seeing pictures of your work. I also have lots of other tutorials on my channel, Ehlke Art, so check those out as well. Thank you so much for watching and hope to see you again soon.